I'm really happy to host this panel discussion, exploring careers in the law, and especially tonight, technology law, which is a huge, broad area. And we are very honored to have two attorneys who are practicing in that area, very different areas, but still within the under the umbrella of technology law. And they will be introducing themselves in just a minute. One is attorney Tom Lebens, and the other one is attorney Amy Kardel. And they're both long-term members of the San Luis Obispo community. I've known them in different contexts over the years. Amy is actually a graduate of Monterey College of Law. And Tom and I have been colleagues during the time that I was practicing 20 years here in San Luis Obispo. So with that, I'm going to start off by asking Tom to first introduce himself and tell us a little bit about his background, and especially what you do now in your practice. So, Mr. Lebens.
Yes, thank you. So I conceived the idea of going to law school while I was a student at Cal Poly, studying electrical engineering. I had planned to get an undergraduate degree in electrical engineering and cap that off with a master's degree in computer science. And got distracted from that trajectory along the way. About 3-4 years in, I was involved with the ASI, the student government at Cal Poly, and was elected and served in that capacity, and got to do all kinds of things like sit on the personnel committee and make all kinds of business decisions, and thought that was pretty interesting. So I started thinking about, well, what else could you do with an undergraduate degree in electrical engineering that wasn't electrical engineering? And somewhere along the line, a local attorney in San Luis Obispo suggested to me that I think about patent law, because in order to practice patent law, you have to have an undergraduate degree or an equivalent amount of undergraduate education in a hard science or in engineering. So that sounded interesting to me. You take a special bar exam we informally call it the patent bar. And so that sounded interesting to me. So I went to law school and took both the California State Bar and then the patent bar, and I've continued to practice patent law. I was down in San Diego for 10 years and then found my way back up to San Luis Obispo. Never occurred to me to go to law school until about 3-4 years into undergrad, and then I started thinking about it. My grandfather was a lawyer, a small town lawyer in a little tiny town, about 1,500 people in Nebraska, and he actually represented my other grandfather, so in an eminent domain case. So I had a little bit of that in my roots, but that's how I ended up going to law school and practicing patent law.
Okay, well, let's hear from Amy Kardel. And so if you could just introduce yourself a little in your background and about your path of going to law school. And then we'll get back to Tom and talk more about what he does now. So yes. Amy.
Well, thanks so much for inviting me, Jan. And thanks, Dina. It's nice to see you. Thanks for spending your evening listening to our stories. It's going to be great to get your questions. So Tom and I know each other a long time, and so I think that the chat will be fun. And my background is a little different than Tom's. I actually thought I'd go to law school from a very young age. I thought, oh, for sure I'm going to law school. And so I grew up in San Luis Obispo, and during high school, I worked for an attorney. In college, I came back in the summers and worked at the district attorney's office. I was all ready to go to law school straight going into college and planned to do a broad liberal arts degree. I went to school in the Bay Area, and wanted to get that degree done as quickly as possible to get to law school. So I ended up majoring in German as an undergraduate. I had been a high school exchange student to Stuttgart, Germany. We have a sister school program in San Luis Obispo to high school in Stuttgart. So my German was really good. So I said, heck, I'll be a German major. I'll finish in 3 years, not 4, because I can test out of a bunch of stuff. Plus, I get another year back in Germany. So I did that. And then I was working in the foreign language library. There's a library on campus for foreign languages, and being in the heart of the tech boom and the tech center, I got all these crazy phone calls as a work study student. Do you know anyone who can translate this software into French, Italian, German, Spanish? And pretty soon I started a little company in my dorm room fulfilling these requests for companies like Sun Microsystems. And so I got sucked into tech before I got to go to law school. And so I finished school, and I had a choice of going into debt to go to law school or being paid not to go to law school yet. And I'd worked with a lot of attorneys through this translation software localization work, and I really didn't like what they were doing. So I kept this tech side hustle, got a full ride for graduate school in German literature. And because I was really young when I graduated anyway, because I was a year ahead, like I told you. So I did that. So I still didn't go to law school. Then the German government gave me their version of like a Fulbright to go back to Munich. And so that's when it got serious. They're like, do you want to do your PhD in German? And I said, I didn't sign up for that. Remember, I wanted to go to, I'm practical, or I wanted to go to law school. So on the side, I had this translation business, and I got a job at Siemens in Munich. You may know that's their headquarters, and worked there in their international HR department, and decided, no, I wasn't going to go for a PhD in German, and still hadn't gone to law school. So long story short, invested and participated in a lot of different tech adventures, worked for tech companies, founded Clever Ducks in San Luis Obispo doing IT consulting. This is getting to be a long story, but I think hopefully we'll get to law school soon, because I didn't get to law school in my own life soon. I didn't even know how I'd squeeze that in, and had kids and life and everything else. And I saw an ad for San Luis Obispo College of Law, and I thought, this is too good to be true. I can do this in San Luis Obispo while I'm working. You've got to be kidding. So I started with Judge Porter's unaccredited school, and then 2 years into that was acquired by the Monterey College of Law. So I made the transition, took the baby bar along the way, because of course we had to do that when we were unaccredited, which was a great filter and a good training ground, and then took and passed the California bar exam in 2000, I want to say 17 or 18 now, I'm not even sure. And so I got into tech before I got into law, and applied law school to everything I've done. So I'll tell you more about that later. But my story is long because it took me a long time to get to law school.
Well, thank you. No, I think really a lot of our students connect with your story. It's like, life is what happens when you're making other plans, as somebody once said. And yeah. So, my journey to law school briefly is that I was in charge of graduate student housing at Stanford, and I had to be a witness in when the university got sued. I had to represent the university in court, and I was just sitting there in court, and I got, ooh, I like this. So that's why I ended up in law school. Now let's go back to Tom. And can you explain exactly what a patent is, and what a patent attorney is, and what your practice is like? What do you do? What do you do all day when you practice?
Well, so for me personally, I practice intellectual property law. Now, the only part of it that requires a special credential is the patent law piece of it. Do trademarks, copyrights, transactions, all related to tech. Patent law uniquely practices before the United States Patent and Trademark Office. And the most simple way to describe it is that I argue that A is different than B all day long. And A and B are highly complex, very technical. Today I was actually working on a system that uses quantum computing And recently, my client has gotten some press because they figured out how to move all the cranes around at the port of Los Angeles to bring the shipping containers in more efficiently, which of course has been in the headlines. So we got to write the patent on how exactly to do that. But it's a blend of technology. So a big piece of it is understanding, just from a technological standpoint, why A is different than B, and then understanding the legal arguments that make that legally significant and presenting those to a patent examiner. That's probably 80% of what I do. And the rest of it is in those kind of other categories, negotiating licenses and client counseling and strategy and things like that. But an awful lot of it is that why is A different than B?
Right. And you're headquartered in San Luis Obispo, but your practice is it national?
Yes. When I first came to San Luis Obispo in 2000, it's hard to believe it was so long ago now, but I would say that 80 or 90% of my work was out of the area. And as you might expect, when you're in a place for a long time, that evolves over time. So I do a lot of work with the Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship and the Small Business Development Center, a lot of startup businesses in the community. I do both some pro bono and some paid consulting to help companies figure out how to position themselves and present a good story to investors and present a good story to potential industry partners as to why the technology they're developing adds value to whatever it is that the audience they're speaking with is interested in.
That's great. Okay, so Amy Kardel, what is your story? What do you do all day? How does your practice involve technology?
So owning a technology company and working closely with technology, I got to know our trade association, and our global trade association is called CompTIA, and that's my day job. CompTIA is the Computer Trade Industry Association for the world, headquartered in Chicago and DC. And by working with the trade association, we had a few different angles. And I went to law school while I was chair of the board of our Global IT Industry Association, actually. And then I went to work for it because I wanted to push forward on workforce policy. The things I work on day to day are really policy related. We're trying to create pathways for folks into tech jobs. I understand exactly what those jobs take and work closely with the U.S. Department of Labor on a few things. So my day today, I was in DC and I am still in DC today. Had lunch with the Swiss ambassador's deputy to talk about, for example, how apprentices from Switzerland and apprentices from the US who are working for Swiss companies are unable to do exchanges because the government visa system doesn't classify apprentices and masters as skilled workers. And that's really gumming things up for the Swiss government, and it's gumming things up for the training of our tech apprentices that work for Swiss companies. Under Trump, the visa changed a little bit. We were trying to protect American workers, and I think no one realized that apprentices are actually very skilled workers. They could be working 20 years in the field and be very needed for these very expensive Swiss machines. And so right now, Swiss companies are very gummed up because they can't bring the trainers over and they can't bring the apprentices over and they can't do an exchange. So I serve on the U.S. Department of Labor's Apprenticeship Advisory Committee. We discussed today, do we bring that issue forward through the committee? Do we go straight to staff? How does the Department of Labor, where we have a lot of influence, actually affect State Department who handles visas? And that type of issue around solving a practical problem in the workforce was part of my day-to-day. Generally, what I think about, though, is when we looked at legislation as well in the Build Back Better plan, where is the funding going to go for workforce? How's it going to flow through the workforce system? And how can we efficiently help move that through? So I'm not a registered lobbyist. I consult with business and I serve on committees, but we have lobbyists in our team and work together on those policy issues. And what's interesting to me is just that little change in language, removing that apprentices weren't skilled workers has such a broad sweeping effect, of course. And I think the reason the law interested me so much is I wanted to have a leveraged impact. I wanted to be able to, spend energy to have things happen in a broad way. And that's what our trade association is trying to do. And thinking about how we help people get back into jobs that are pandemic proof is a big piece of what we're thinking about, and the demand is there. So thinking about how things in the Workforce Innovation Act are worded, and how can we really look at that legal language and understand, okay, this is where we can push and this is what needs to change.
So Amy, let me ask you a question. Has earning your JD at San Luis Obispo College of Law helped your career? How would you say it's affected your career?
Well, I think it really did. I had an aha moment even as a student. I did a capstone project on email privacy. And I had a lawyer in DC as my advisor. And I remember sitting in a meeting with the senator's legislative director and talking through the email privacy law. And what was so interesting is, even though I understood so much about the technology before, I think the terminology and sort of the very detailed and nuanced meaning of specific words was lost on me until I went to law school. And I think a lot of people on the Hill have gone to law school. So there's sort of this like expected understanding that you understand what they mean. Mm-hmm. And it could be a common word. I'm trying to think of what word it was, but I had this huge aha light bulb over it, where everyone else in the room, except for the two of us who had legal training, really didn't understand what was going on. And I went, oh my gosh, wow, click. This is interesting. I got it now.
Click. Okay.
Click. There was a click for that. So I think that, the words are very constructed, very specific meaning, and they might be used in other contexts. So if you don't have that training, you can't understand where they're going.
Right. They have the words themselves have legal significance.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I have often thought that being a lawyer is like being a sawyer. Sawyer is a carpenter, but instead of using lumber and such to build a boat or whatever, we're using words and
it was very specific. Like they meant a dowel that was this shape, and everyone else thought they just meant a piece of wood. It was very interesting.
Right. And the point is to make a legal boat for your clients that is not going to sink, that has no leaks in it, that everything is perfect. So, well, thank you. I have another question, which is whether you guys had mentors, or how you were inspired when you were law students, and also in terms of your practice. And I'll start with Tom again. Did you have anyone who was kind of looking out for you and inspiring you as a young person?
Well, no question about it. The surprising thing about mentorship is that it can come from you to you in all different directions. So, and by that I mean it can be somebody who's senior to you, which is kind of what everybody thinks of as a mentor. And I certainly had mentors when I first joined. The partners of the law firm, particular ones of them were mentors to me, but I also had peers that were mentors along the way. And as I've gotten older, I've been surprised to find that I have a lot of younger people who I now think of as mentors. And so I think that, you need to look 360 degrees around you for mentors. I don't think it's a one-to-one relationship. You don't necessarily just have one mentor. You're not a bad person if you only have one, but you can have many, and in many walks and aspects of your life, and even aspects of your legal practice. I think that, there's practice, there's mentors that might mentor you on specific areas or aspects of the law, but that might be a very different person that might mentor you on things like how to be efficient, or how to organize your day, or how to do do networking with potential clients. And so there's all kinds of mentors, but no question. And it's sort of countercultural, I think, to we're sort of in this rugged individualist, and it's a sign of weakness if you ask for help society. And the reality is that I think the strongest people are the ones who ask for help and that seek those mentoring relationships.
Yeah, I think it doesn't just happen from the mentor. It's not just the mentor seeking out the mentee. In a way, exactly what you said. It's really important to be open to seeking mentors, and you know, it's really at the heart of so much of the legal profession. The law is a teaching profession, and has been way all the way back, certainly before computers. So Amy, did you have anyone inspiring you or bringing you along?
Absolutely. And, you know, I think Tom's exactly right. You're lucky to have a mentor, though. I think for a long time, I've had gaps where I didn't, you know, in certain areas. I think it's so important to be coachable and learning all the time. And that's certainly the law is a learning, lifelong learner aspiration. You know, you always are like, oh, what's next and what's learning. And so, but I look back and I think, yeah, there were stretches where I had great mentors and there were stretches where I haven't. The most valuable relationships, though, are the sponsors. I think it's like a next level mentoring. You know, if I look back, that's the person who nominates you to chair a committee. That's the person who invites you to join an important board. That's the person who says, call Amy to interview her on that subject. Those sponsorships are cherished, you know, and I would be looking for that next level thing when you're ready to think about mentors, but really think about sponsors. And there's two people I can think of specifically who've sponsored me in many ways to be on corporate boards that I just can't thank them enough. And I try to remember to thank them every time something interesting happens because they've since retired, some of them. So kind of that next level put me in coach relationship is really cool. And but if I think about the law school, there's a really special relationship I'd be remiss if I didn't mention. That's Judge Porter. Like I said, I started law school with him, and he tried to scare me, you know, jumping around in his Brooks Brothers suit with a bow tie in my husband's former 6th grade classroom at Pacheco, no less, but the old Pacheco. And it was great because he treated it just like it was a big law classroom, you know. And we've formed quite a friendship over the last, 10 years, 15 years now, I guess. And so it's been interesting to think about how he really invested in me after hours and spent a lot of time with me. And so I really appreciate that professor relationship. And even though we were so small and such a funky little school, it was really special. And I really think you can find great relationships with your professors too. I found as we continue in Monterey College of Law, there's people I've called back to say, hey, I don't get this. Tell me what this means,
Yeah, that's wonderful.
And Jen, I appreciate that about you too.
Oh, okay. Let me just ask you a question about, let's say someone is considering going into technology law. What qualities would make someone a really good attorney? And what do you think about the future of technology law?
If I can jump in,
yeah,
I would say understanding business is really important in any tech law. How does the company, like Tom was talking about, add value with a patent? But how does it make its money? How does it add value? And understanding those business fundamentals and sort of that business sense, I think, is a very valuable thing to bring to any counsel you give that makes it very practical. One of the advantages of going to law school late in life is I had all that other business and life experience. Then I went, oh, okay, now I get the legal piece, and now I can combine the two and be more powerful. And I think understanding that how the company makes money and who are their competitors and just the landscape and the ecosystem that they're thriving in, super important. Tom, what do you think?
Oh, Amy, your comments remind me of a opening line in the first day of class in my remedies class in law school. Believe it or not, I can remember that. And my remedies professor said, and it just burned into me. He said, "This is the only class your clients will ever care about." And if you think about it, we as lawyers, we study all these causes of actions and theories of law. Clients don't care about all that. They care about your remedy. And to extend beyond remedies, of course, because that's a very litigation-centric concept, you extend to what Amy just said. What is the outcome that client is looking for, and focusing on that. What I also want to say with regard to technology law, I think there are three dimensions that I would say when you say technology law, I think of three different things. One is, are you practicing law that directly relates to technology? And certainly, patent law is one of those. Amy mentioned email privacy earlier. I think privacy is a big area that involves technology. So is the substantive law that you're dealing with directly related to technology? The second area I would say is, how are you using technology? And you can be practicing, in just about any legal field. And my daughter, very proud of my daughter, she's a Northwestern law graduate and practiced for Wilkie Farr in New York City now. And she had a senior partner come to her and ask her to prepare for him a memo on what the damage calculation, I think it was, based on particular dates. Now, my daughter knew that the better way to present this information was to program a spreadsheet that would actually calculate based on how many business days and all this sort of thing that these. So she presented, and this partner was like, "Oh no, I want this in paragraph form," So I think that we have to be open as lawyers to the technologies. It's gonna impact how and we have to become literate in technology and these different software platforms, whether it's a artificial intelligence search engine for discovery or an Excel spreadsheet. We can't just be about, a written paragraph in Microsoft Word anymore. And then the third area, the final area I'm going to talk about, is we have to understand how technology is impacting us. And, what I gave a presentation to the American Intellectual Property Law Association. It's probably been close to 10 years ago now, but I'll never forget it. I stood up at the podium. I was moderating a panel, and I said, "How many of you realize that your malpractice insurance does not cover you for data breaches?" Ooh. And you could have heard a pin drop in that room, because at that point in time, nobody had thought about, what if my client's incredibly valuable technology information that we have sitting on our servers at our law firm is the subject of a data breach? So we have to practice technology law substantively. We have to use technology in our practice, and we have to be prepared for the consequences of technology on how we run our businesses and how we run our law firms. So there's no escaping it, I guess, is the outcome of that. Whether you think you want to practice tech law or not, it's going to have a profound impact on how we move forward. I've told my daughter, the pencils you need to sharpen are interpersonal skills, highly creative skills, because if what you really have a passion for is comparing clause 4 of this non-disclosure agreement with clause 4 of this other non-disclosure agreement, you're under threat, because the artificial intelligence will be able to do that within 10 years. And I have a colleague up in Silicon Valley who does just that. NDAs are nobody wants to spend $10,000 analyzing an NDA. You don't even know if you want the business relationship yet at that stage. They feed their NDAs into a piece of software, and it says, these are substantive differences. These are just wording differences. And I wouldn't bet the farm on what the AI is telling me at this point, but fast forward 10 years, it's only going to get better. And so, I think as we think about our careers moving forward, it's those trust building skills, those interpersonal skills, those creative skills that are really going to define us and set us apart as as lawyers that are going to excel. If you want to go into a room and have somebody shove assignments under the door and then you shove them back at the end of the day, that's going to be a rough road given what technology has in store for the practice of law.
Well, that's great, Tom. And Amy, did you want to add to that?
I think the one last thing I would say is, the reason technology jobs and tech law are so likely to continue to be valuable is that the technologies all add value to every other business. They're helpers, they're leverage. Technology by its nature is a tool to do more with less. And so when we look at technology policy and jobs, we see over and over studies show that training for tech jobs has a higher return than any other sector practically, which makes sense because it's something that has leverage. So not that you should choose based on what's the highest paying job, but there's going to be business in this area for a long time. It's going to be well paid. And even if you think you hate math and science and would never, ever go there, there's a piece of technology law that probably still applies to you. So I know some people are technophobes and would say, oh, I never want to be interested in that. But I would challenge you to look past, obviously Tom's heavy on the tech side of tech law, but I would challenge you to think, oh, that's interesting. Okay, so what else is there? Well, there's a lot of things around technology that aren't heavy math and science, but they all are are growing and well paid because they add so much value in the business operations of other businesses and in tech businesses themselves.
Well, that's great. I think it's wonderful that you both are located in San Luis Obispo and are able to carry on practices that are local, that are statewide, that are national and international. And partly that's because of technology, right? Here we are on Zoom talking about it, So unless there's anything else people want to say right now, I'd like to turn to the questions. And if you would just raise your hands. And I have to admit a technological problem. I have no idea how to admit someone once they raise their hand. So I don't know, Dina, would you want to do that? Would you be able to do that?
Yeah, so if you have a question, you can raise your hand and you can unmute yourself and just ask your question and remute yourself. And again, you can use the reactions raised hand, the emoji down at the bottom of your Zoom screen to raise your hand as well. Either way.
Yeah, see, so I'll just raise my hand right now. If you hit reactions, it says raise hand. There it is in the corners. And I'm going to say lower hand. Oops. Uh-oh, what happened?
You're still
I see
there.
some hands.
So we do have a question. I can lower your hand, Jan. There you go.
Oh, okay, good. Whoa, all right. Yeah, what's the question? Let's see, Michelle.
Go ahead, Michelle.
Sorry, I had to unmute myself. Hi,
Yeah.
Thank you everyone for this opportunity and for taking the time to give this this webinar or this Zoom session, informational session, I should say. If I may ask just a general question, this is a fascinating topic, tech law. I have a library science degree, so I had the opportunity to information technology, or more of like the reference background, helping the patrons versus the technology aspect. But I did dabble in a lot of that, having to work with the library environment. I was just wanting to inquire, does with an MCL law, is it really that since the last comment was about how business and work with our two presenters on the panel are statewide and international, with MCL, does it matter about the accreditation for this sort of work? Does that affect credibility or have anything to do with the flow of your work and who's able to reach you? And yeah.
Okay, so Michelle, if I understand your question correctly, you're asking if a California accredited law school versus an ABA accredited law school affects
Yes.
the
Yes.
ability to do what I want to do. For me, absolutely not, because I'm not in a courtroom. It might matter if I want to be admitted in another state. There are some, depending on what state you want to do this in, because I looked into it at one point to see, okay, what would it mean for me if I want to be admitted? And I think it depends on, the mileage may vary, like in Washington, D.C. or federally, if you've practiced for a certain number of years, you can skip being an ABA school. In other states, you can't. We're headquartered in Illinois, and in Illinois, it depended what my score was on the multiple choice section of the bar exam. If I made a cut, then I could come in after 5 years of practice. I looked at that right before I was going through all this, and I thought it doesn't matter to me, hasn't mattered to me. But when I get to that 5 years of practice, I guess that's next year or the year after, then I may apply to be in other bars, but it hasn't mattered for what I do. But I think for what Tom does, it probably has a whole totally different answer.
Yeah, Tom, would you like to address that?
Thank you.
Yeah, I would say this, that, things like grades and accredited and the name of the law school, rankings, all that, they matter relatively more early in your career. As you put down, more mileage, they're going to matter less and less. The other thing I would say is that if you bring a technical skill to the field, there's so few people who bring that's going to differentiate you. And so, there aren't that many electrical engineers. There aren't that many IT services, German-speaking lawyers out there. I mean, they're just, so that, in both my case and Amy's case, we have substantial other differentiating qualities. So that tends to differentiate us. If I was going to go apply to the firm where my daughter's working, I probably couldn't get, even today, probably couldn't get a job there. And I did go to an ABA school, but I wasn't a top 10 ABA school. So it kind of depends on what your career trajectory is, but there's lots and lots of opportunities, particularly in the tech field, that are not going to be hindered by the accreditation or the ranking of the law school and that sort of thing.
Yeah, if I can add to that, I mean, basically every state and every territory has got different criteria, and some of them exchange with California. If you pass the bar in California, it's easy to practice law elsewhere. Other states are really picky and really kind of closed in that way. And so it would really be a question of where you would want to practice, but in general, the main thing is that once you pass the bar, nobody cares. And locally, I went through our San Luis Obispo County Bar Association directory and just highlighted all the people who had gone to California state accredited CALS law schools like MCL. And it was about 15%, including one judge, right? Evidently in Monterey County, where the MCL has been going for 50 years, it's closer to 40% of the people who are practicing law, and quite a few judges. So it's really, I think the big question is what fits into your life. And the fact that MCL is nonprofit, and most of our students are able to graduate with very little debt and also work and go to law school at the same time, although it is definitely a hard thing to do for sure. I mean, the students are my heroes. In the long run, it doesn't matter unless you have very particular career aim where it would matter.
If I can jump in and add something,
Yeah,
Jan, I think you're absolutely right. The one piece of advice I would make sure to give anyone is, it probably makes sense for you, if you're coming in mid-career with a law degree, to add to what you're already doing. not to start something new. You know, I had already gone up this tree and was doing these things and then added law on as a branch off of that tree versus planting a new tree and starting again. Because it would have been a different choice. It would have been, you know, I wouldn't have been able to use my network. I wouldn't have made as much money. I wouldn't have, you know, had all these leverage points. So I think unless you want to plant a new tree, try to figure out how to put a branch on the tree you already have.
Okay, let's see who's next.
Thank
I think
you so
Brandon,
much.
has your hand been up for a while? Yeah, if you can unmute yourself, that'd be good. Yes, Brandon, what's your question?
Hey, well, let me preface. Sorry, I had something I couldn't get out of, so I'm obviously in my car. I had to pull over to do this. The lighting's awful, but I didn't want to miss this. I liked the tree analogy. My question is, I had kind of an unconventional path to get here. I was in the military. I went to graduate school in a different field in international relations, and I actually did technology entrepreneurship through the MBA program at University of Washington. You had just talked about planting a new tree, and that's kind of where I was at. I was looking at getting something more rooted into public service, whether that's public defender, prosecutor, but something that's really rooted into public service, mediation, advocacy, trial. And I thought, well, God, there's going to be a disconnect. I have this background in business, technology, entrepreneurship. Do I need to completely pivot away? My question for you, the panelists, would be any sort of experience in trial law where you took your knowledge of technology law and applied it into a mediation or courtroom setting like that.
Okay, maybe Tom can address that.
So I'm not a litigator, but in fact, I often jokingly tell people that I've been to court twice in my career. And I think that's not too far off. And one was a motion to change venue, which I won, and the case went off to Nevada. And so I was done with it at that point. And then the other one was a small claims case, actually, where I was a witness in San Luis Obispo, which we were successful with. But so I'm not a great reference when it comes to litigation. But I will say that things like public defender's office and DA's office are a great way to get a crash course in trial work. If you know, you'll be on the fast track in those kinds of ways in those two environments, because they do an awful lot of that kind of work in those kinds of offices. There's such a vast array of ways to exercise the desire you have to serve the public. Many cities, for example, in the city attorney's office, have internship opportunities and city attorney opportunities. Same with county council offices. There's lots of opportunities there. There's many nonprofits that focus that help children and families to navigate the court systems. We have some examples of that in our community here in San Luis Obispo. There's no shortage of opportunities, whether it's something you're getting paid for or something that you're volunteering to do on top of what you're paid to do. Your possibilities will be limitless, because there really is a need for people who are able to navigate the legal system, that have a heart for public service, that wish to do that within any community, really. I hope that's a helpful answer, but that's what comes to mind for me.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'd like to just add to that. I did construction law for a number of years, and luckily, when you do construction law, my witnesses were these construction workers. So I had these big, really muscle-bound guys carrying my banker's boxes full of all of my paper exhibits, you know, in the trial. I did litigation for many years. Now it can all be done on the computer with CAD, and you don't have to, I mean, the way that the computers have taken over trial practice is just awesome. It's really helped so much. And I'm sure it will continue, in the future, especially like with this pandemic. It's just people are sharing screens and doing all kinds of things. So, keep it up. And I think we have time for one more question. Rodney, did you have a question? Yeah.
I do. Thank you. And thank you to the panelists and everybody participating. Appreciate it. Yeah. Excuse me. I haven't talked in a while. I didn't realize I was going to have a frog in my throat.
Okay.
So Thomas, yeah, no, I hate that one. Thomas, it really stood out to me, your wordings about the remedy or solving client problems. And, I really, I kind of got two questions, but I kind of like to know what works best for you. What have you learned? Is there a class you took? Is it more about the mentorship that taught you about how to get to this remedy quicker? Because I've been a client before too, and everybody just wants to talk and tell you the story, but actually getting the problem seems like it's the most difficult thing. In some cases anyways. And then the other question is the administrative. I heard a couple of both of you and Amy talk about administrative law or tech law, but is administrative law then pretty much tech law now then? Or I know that might sound like a dumb question, but it seems like everything would be. But anyways, those are my two questions.
Okay, well, can you address that, Tom? There's a lot there, those two questions.
The first question I think was, referenced my professor's comment that remedies was the only class that your clients will ever care about. And I was hitching my wagon to Amy's comment of really understanding what business your client's in. And I think that we get all excited because that's frankly the muscle we strengthen in law school. We're thrown a bunch of facts and we're expected to discern from those facts what a cause of action might be, what the legal implications of those facts are, and then to opine on what those facts mean legally. And that is a vital skill for a lawyer, but it's really not anything your clients care about. And so I think it's really important. I often ask my clients, well, how would you like this to end up? What would be the outcome you would like from this? And sometimes it's not realistic, but then that invites that conversation with the client about what might be possible based on the information. And it might prompt me to ask for additional information from the client. And what about this? What about that? I've got a client now, for example, who would like to create a patent portfolio that is infringed by some competitors. But the facts are going to make that difficult. And so I started talking about them. Well, would it work to create a portfolio that really surrounded your core products and perhaps didn't fully cover what your competitors are doing? Could you shift your marketing strategy so that it focused on the advantages of your core products over the competitors? And then we create a fence around what you're doing so your competitors can't step into that place that we've spent money marketing to. Creating a belief on the part of customers that this is a really good product. These features are really good, and then let's build a fence around that product and those features. So it's really about understanding what your client wants and then helping them to understand, well, within the realm of legal possibilities, where might we be able to get you to.
And I'll jump in on the second part of the question.
Yes.
Administrative law, is really that executive branch law looking at regulations. And certainly Department of Labor, things I was talking about today are regulations and have touch on tech because it touches tech workforce, but there's lots of administrative law that's not technical for sure. Things like maybe tax or transportation or something, but there are two that are big in our sphere of influence in tech, and it's international trade. I have several colleagues who just look at import, really differences on what'll be taxed how as an import for trade. So they do classification of that kind of thing, is really detailed tech job. And also in like broadcasting, I think that's another piece where the regulation, how they apply the technology is really specific. So there's definitely places where administrative law is technical, but there's lots where it's not too. So thanks for asking, Rodney.
Great. Well, we're going to have to stop. We could keep going for another couple hours. I really enjoyed this. Thank you so much, Tom and Amy, for helping us all understand what it would mean to really have a career in tech law. But our students have to get to class at 6:30. So they're in danger right now of being late. So we're going to have to sign off.
So I think we might have a chance. Amir has a question. If it's a short one, we might be able to address it quickly.
Okay.
Before our students need to tag off.
Okay.
So Amir, go ahead. If you have a short question, we might be able to get to it.
I will try to. Good evening, gentlemen, and I just want to squeeze in my question here and direct to Mr. Attorney Tom. It's kind of four-pronged question, but let's see how good it goes. Does Attorney Tom, your work, does it have compliance law as part of your work, and what percentage it is? And also a different question. What is the difference between a patent bar and a state bar? And I was kind of holding on to these questions. What is the hardest part of your job? And do you have to write articles regarding this thing? Thank you.
I think we'll have time for just one of those questions.
Yeah, Tom, why don't you pick one of his questions?
All right. Well, I can answer the question about the difference between the patent bar and the state bar fairly quickly. So the patent bar licenses a person to practice before the patent office. So I can apply for a patent application. I can argue with an examiner. I can argue with the Patent Trial and Appeal Board. I can even counsel clients with regard to those things. If I go up to the Federal Circuit Court of Appeals, which is the appeals court that the patent office feeds into, or if I want to litigate a patent for infringement, those items require the state bar. So if it's in a court, it's the state bar. If it's before the agency, it's the patent bar.
Okay, that's great. Well, thank you, everyone. And if you still have questions, just go ahead and email me and I'll get them to either Amy or Tom. So jmarks@slowlaw.org. And thank you. And thank you, Dina, for setting this up. I really appreciate it. And
absolutely. Thank you so much to the panelists and to you, Dean Marx. And I hope everyone has a wonderful evening and stay safe and stay healthy.
Yes, let's do that.